My name's Katie. The most exciting part about me is that I am a mom to a nearly 2-year-old. How I became a mom is a bit of an interesting one because I ended up becoming a kidney recipient following the birth of my daughter. So I'm here to share my story in hopes that I can relate to anyone else that also has ended up having to receive a kidney transplant or any transplant in general, because I know when I was going through it, hearing other people's stories and how they got to the other side was really encouraging and took away a lot of those fears that I had. So I will get right to it. It all started, I was 26 weeks pregnant, and I had a complication where I ended up having to be rushed to the hospital, to our local hospital. And from there, they thought I was going to deliver, so they needed to transport me to a level 1 hospital, which ended up being Sunnybrook. There I spent quite some time. I was put on bed rest there, and in hopes to keep my daughter in as long as possible. But unfortunately, at 28 weeks, I started experiencing more complications, and my daughter started showing signs of distress. So the OB came in and he said, at 4:30 in the morning, we need to deliver her. Today is the day. So they contacted my husband, who got there as soon as possible. And luckily, they were able to hold off until he was there to be with me. And I was a scheduled C-section because of my complications that I had. And so we got gowned up, brought into the surgery room. We were very excited. Most people, and so were we, scared to deliver that early. But we also were appreciative that we had at least that extra 2 weeks. We thought we were going to deliver at 26. So 28 weeks seemed a lot better than 26. So we made the most of it. We were excited. And I delivered my daughter, and we heard her cry. They told us she was beautiful and making the sounds and doing everything she should be doing at 28 weeks. She was brought right into the room where they prepped her to bring her immediately down to the NICU. And I was brought to the recovery room where they just monitor you following your surgery. And in the recovery room, I felt phenomenal. However, there was a lot of nurses and doctors coming in and out. And at first, I thought it was normal until I started to pick up on a bit of worry. My blood pressure was, I think, 70 on 30, somewhere around there. It was really, really low. However, like I said, I was feeling fine. So I think I was a bit on a high from delivering. And then, so my blood pressure was low. That was the first sign that something was wrong. And so they started doing more testing. And then long story short, they had a hard time getting blood work from me. There was kind of a multitude of things that were continuing to go wrong in the recovery room. So I was brought down to the ICU. And again, things kept progressing to get worse and worse and worse. My vitals were declining further. So I was transferred to critical care. At that point, I started to become slightly unconscious. And this is the part that I wish my husband was here to say, because he experienced this firsthand more so than me, because I was unconscious. But basically, everything started to fail. My heart, my brain, my lungs, my kidneys, my liver, everything started to fail. And it was determined after quite a few tests and many, many doctors and specialists looking into what was going on, that I ended up experiencing a amniotic fluid embolism, which is a very, very rare complication that can happen before, during, or after the birth of your child. And it's where the amniotic fluid gets into the bloodstream and causes a toxic reaction. So the only thing that they can do is prevent your organs from deteriorating to the point where they cannot heal and recover. Unfortunately, or I guess I should say fortunately, everything did end up recovering except for my kidneys were too far damaged due to that complication. So I was put on sledge dialysis, which is 24/7 dialysis for anybody that doesn't know. And I didn't end up coming to until about 3 or 4 days after delivering my daughter. And I had no idea what happened. I didn't know how much time had gone by. They asked me what day it was, and I said it was Thursday, which was the day that I delivered my daughter, and it was actually Sunday morning. And they made it seem as though it was just a minor complication that I had. They kind of went along with what my reality was. And that was all because my husband said she should not know how bad it is, because if she does, her body will go into stress mode and it will be harder for her to recover. And I think sometimes I get emotional, but I think that him saying that probably like saved my life, because I knew that, because he made me feel like, sorry, let me go back, because the doctors made me feel like I was okay, and that gave me the strength to push through and just want to see my daughter and not really care about anything else that was going on around me. Luckily, 6 days later, I was able to come out of critical care and come back up to the high risk obstetrics unit, where I was put there to recover. This was again 6 days after, or 7 days after the birth of my daughter. And I didn't know when I was going to get to see her. But we have some pretty incredible doctors at our reach around here who made sure that I could meet my daughter sooner than later. So for the first time ever, they had never done this before, but they were able to bring my daughter Palmer's incubator with everything she was attached to, including a generator to keep everything plugged in, and wheel her up to the floor that I was on, the high risk obstetrics unit, so that I could meet her. They were really after my husband to get me to provide breast milk, because it is so effective for babies that are born that early because of the immune support that breast milk gives. So for that entire 6 days that I was unconscious, my husband hand expressed me, as well as some of the nurses and my mother, who were basically getting no milk at all. But the second that she was brought up into the room with me in the high risk obstetrics unit and they placed her on my chest, my milk just came flying in, and I was able to provide my ultra preemie with an endless supply of breast milk to give her the strength to also fight the battles she was fighting. And the whole room was in tears for that moment. But back to my transplant story, is they gave me a period of time that they would hope that my kidneys would recover following the amniotic fluid embolism. So luckily, after almost 2 months, I was able to come home. However, my daughter remained in the NICU for almost 100 days, but I was able to come home after almost 2 months. But I still had to go back for dialysis 3 times a week. And that was extremely hard. I think being a first-time mom, or a mom in general, and having to also navigate health complications, like having to go for dialysis 3 times a week for 4 hours every day was probably the hardest thing I think I'll ever have to go through in my life. But I managed with the help of my extremely supportive husband and the rest of our family. I had the most incredible support system ever that helped get us through that. Fast forward to about 2 months following the birth of my daughter, I was told that my kidneys had not recovered and have only gotten worse. Being on dialysis while I was also needing to take care of my daughter was so tough, but I'm so thankful for so many things. Definitely the doctors that took care of me and the nurses and all the medical staff that took care of me. Like I said, our support system was incredible. But also my husband's a firefighter, and they granted him the time off that he needed to be able to take care of his wife and daughter, which was extremely helpful because he was able to be home for most of the time that I was on dialysis. Dialysis is really hard, and you really don't know unless you've been on dialysis. But I remember the doctors saying that it's the equivalent of running a marathon. That's how you feel afterwards because of how much energy is generated in your body to just sit and be on dialysis and have your blood cleaned. I remember coming home from dialysis and just being non-functional. Like the most I could do was dialysis was hard. I just remember like only having the energy to like smile at her. Like I couldn't lift her. I couldn't play with her. All I could do was ask my husband to keep her awake until I got home so that one, I could see her, and two, I could nap with her because I had zero energy, like below zero. So every day I would come home from dialysis and the two of us would just go lay down and have a nap together because my body was so drained. And then every other day when I wasn't on dialysis, because I was still so exhausted from dialysis that I didn't get anything done that day, that I felt like I had so much to do on my non-dialysis days that it was just a mix of emotions between stressing to get everything done and also spend the time with my daughter. So I needed to go on the transplant list. At this age, it was something that I had never, ever thought that I would go through. Nor did I have any knowledge behind it, but it felt like a dump truck just hit me going full speed ahead. And I just remember being very confused about what was next and what that looked like. However, after listening to others' stories, it really made me feel empowered and like I could handle what was about to come. I think I was put on the transplant list in October of 2021. And by the time the process all happened and we got through all the paperwork, they basically told my husband that you need to cast as big of a net as possible to find your donor because you're unlikely to be a match for her because of her carrying your daughter. She would likely have antibodies against your DNA. And she also received multiple blood transfusions. So she's going to have a high antibody count. So we're going to need lots of applicants to filter through to find her the right match. So my husband created a Facebook group page and gave a brief story on where we were at and the dying need for me to have a transplant and the need for a donor. And we had an overwhelming amount of people sign up, which still, I don't know how to ever appreciate or show appreciation to the people that did sign up. It will always mean so much to me. However, as soon as my husband posted that, we had an old friend of ours that we actually met in Mexico on our honeymoon back in 2019. We met him on that trip, and he ended up telling us that this was his, while we were telling him that we were on our honeymoon, he was telling us that this was his last hurrah before he went home, and actually was an anonymous liver donation just out of the goodness of his heart. So we thought he was such an incredible human and soul that we kept in touch over the years. And as soon as my husband posted the need for my donor, he messaged my husband, Scott, and said, "Scott, you need to call me right away. I have something to tell you." So they talked on the phone, and somehow I don't think I'll ever meet somebody as generous and kind as Tyler, who was my donor. He ended up calling Scott and telling him that he had just signed up to also be a kidney donor, and he had already gone through the process with UHN, and that he was going to call them and reallocate his anonymous kidney donation to me. So my husband called me, and he's just like, "You're not going to believe this," and told me, and it just felt too good to be true. We thought, okay, no, they told me my antibody count's going to be high. Like, there's no way that he's going to be a match. And lo and behold, he ended up being the perfect match for me. I had a 0 antibody count, and basically we were put on the list to go ahead as soon as a surgery date opened. So we found that out in November, but because of a lot of complications that happened during my birth, they really wanted to narrow it down and make sure there was no complementary issues going on that caused the kidney failure. So our process was a little bit lengthier before we truly got put on the list. But in November, that's when we found out that he was my donor. And in July of 2021, I received my kidney transplant, and everything went smooth. He was up and walking not even a day later, as if nothing happened. I swear he's Superman. And I also just felt phenomenal. And to this day, all I can think back on is when I watched those videos of other people that had gone through this, and they kept saying the worst of it is right now while you're on dialysis. After that, you're going to feel amazing. And that is absolutely true. I didn't really believe it when I was hearing it before I went through all this, but now I can truly attest to that you will physically feel almost like yourself again shortly after. I will never know how to thank Tyler and every other donor in the world that provides life to those in need, whether it's organ donation, tissue donation, or even donating blood. You guys are absolutely saving lives, and Tyler is a true testament to generosity and care, and we will forever be so thankful for him. In fact, we actually named him our daughter's godfather because of how much he means to us and will forever mean to us for the rest of our lives. My favorite thing to do with her is definitely be outside. I now live more so in the city, but I grew up north, so I have always spent so much time outside. So it's so nice to see that she loves outdoors as much as I do. Even in the mornings when she wakes up in her crib, I just hear her going, outside, outside, when she sees the sun shining through her window. So I would say anything outside is my favorite. She's so adventurous, and although she was born at 28 weeks, she has defied all odds. And I can truly say that, along with the doctors, nurses, family, Tyler And she has also been a major, major part of my healing. And I've always said that she's my medicine. I had a lot of people say, I don't know how you're doing it and you're still smiling. And I just said, well, because I have to. I'm a mom, and I know what the alternative was, because the survival rate of an amniotic fluid embolism is 1 in 5. So when you put that into perspective, I was the lucky one. I always say I'm the lucky of the unlucky. So, I survived something that, 4 out of 5 people do not survive. And when I put that into perspective, it gives me a whole new appreciation for life. And, all those small problems that happen in the day, they don't feel big to me. But yeah, she has ultimately been my medicine, and probably between her and Tyler, the biggest part of my healing. I sure didn't expect to experience this early in my life, or it be the aftermath of having my daughter, but in the same sense, it's created a new appreciation for life. And I'll forever be thankful for my support system, and Tyler and Palmer my daughter being as strong as she did to fight all the odds that she also had to endure. The difference between being on dialysis as a mom and not being on dialysis anymore is like, I feel like I'm in a whole new world where, yes, there's some tough days, especially now that she's a toddler. If you know, you know. But to think back on how much I missed out on in those first 11 months with her, I don't take advantage of any days or experiences or memories that I get to make with her now.
There's definitely a lifelong healing journey that happens when you've been that close to death, but there's also a new appreciation for the little things day to day and the people around you, and being able to move your body and fuel your body the way you want. Also an appreciation for our medical system, because they're also a huge part in why I'm here today and able to share my story. And for Tyler, the appreciation goes far beyond words that I still can't put together. He gave me the ability to be the mom that I always dreamed of being for my daughter.